Hello and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode. We're talking all about lactation and sleep. Well, maybe not all about, because that's a huge topic, right? But we're going to talk about the interconnectedness and interrelatedness of lactation and sleep, because we think of them so often as these separate topics, and we certainly culturally treat them as separate topics. But the reality is our lactation experiences and goals and expectations absolutely intersect, interconnect, and shape our sleep experiences, expectations, goals, right? And it goes both ways. So I get really frustrated because it's not uncommon for me to talk to a parent who had bad sleep advice tank their supply. Right? And so I feel really strongly that lactating parents need sleep information that is lactation knowledgeable, because just because some parents can get away with something doesn't mean all parents can get away with something, right? And it breaks my heart. The things that I hear from parents about night feeds and lactation and sleep and night weaning, really, infants, really young babies that still need to be fed, and at times where, we could do a lot of damage to a parent's supply, and in situations where that supply is really fragile and it's completely inappropriate to cut out night feeds. And it's just so frustrating. And it comes from the sleep profession, like the sleep training world, but it comes from pediatricians. It comes from therapists sometimes. It comes from so many healthcare providers and other folks who are just not qualified. And it's just, anyway, we're not going to dwell on that. What I want to talk about is a few things about lactation and sleep that I think are really important for parents to know, because ultimately, the information allows you to make informed decisions, right? And rank competing priorities and just think through the whole landscape of it all on your own, right? So first, we're going to talk about the parent side of things, right? And what I mean here is that the vast majority of parents, lactating parents, nursing parents, need nighttime milk removal in order to maintain their supply. This is true, in infancy. Generally, toddlers, your milk supply is pretty well established, and you can go longer between feeds without completely tanking your supply. It's going to drop, of course, because most parents have their milk supply drop when they're nursing a toddler to a certain extent, because that toddler is eating food. But when we're thinking about infants, I think we really need to be mindful that, lactation is meant to be something that happens around the clock, and that milk removal drives production of more milk. So what I mean here is that lactation is demand and supply. And I have purposely reversed those. From not supply and demand, it's demand and supply, meaning that we remove milk and that signals the body to make more milk. And if we don't remove milk and the mammary tissue, right, the breast, the chest tissue gets overly full, it can signal the body to make less milk, to slow down production. And so when we're thinking about night feeds, right, a parent may be trying to stretch the time between night feeds or night wean too soon, that can really send that signal to the body, hey, let's make less milk. And depending on the big picture, that can be enough for a lot of parents to really start to drop their supply before they're ready for their supply to be dropped. And this is where I see so much in the sleep training world, right? We're being told to night wean babies from like 6 months on by so many professionals. And I'm just like, no. You still need your supply then if you want to keep nursing, right? And this is where the goals all need to line up. So what affects this, right? Because there's a wide range of normal. And so this is affected by your storage capacity and, how robust or resilient your milk supply is. So if you don't know what storage capacity is, it's simply the amount of milk the breast, the glandular tissue, the milk-making tissue can hold in between feeds before you get full, right? And before you start to send those signals to the body to downregulate milk. So some people can hold a lot of milk and some people can hold less milk. And this will shape your baby's feeding pattern. Someone with smaller storage capacity is going to have a baby that needs to feed more often to get enough milk in 24 hours. And someone with larger storage capacity, their baby might be able to go longer between feeds. It doesn't always work like that, but they have at least the potential, right? Their body can go longer between milk removal without feeling uncomfortably full or downregulating their supply. So your storage capacity affects those night feeds and how they affect your supply, but also your supply affects this, which seems kind of silly, right? But if somebody has a very resilient, robust, abundant supply, they might be able to get away with going a bit longer between feeds at night than somebody with a really a really fragile, not resilient, kind of just have enough, or maybe's had a bunch of supply issues. That person probably really needs those night feeds to drive continued milk production. And so it really breaks my heart when I get folks who've worked with other sleep consultants who told them to night wean and they had a whole bunch of supply issues. And by the time they get to me, their supply is minimal to gone, they've lost so much of their supply and it's not always possible to get it back. And they fought so hard. And then it was sleep advice that derailed it. It just, kills me. So, right, there's going to be a lot of variation here. Your storage capacity, your supply, your individual body, how long you can go before the body starts to downregulate milk. Now, this also is about how many milk removals in 24 hours. Oh my goodness, I forget the lactation consultant. I think it was Nancy Mortbacher calls it the magic number, which is just how often do you have to remove milk in 24 hours to maintain your supply. And that's another very individual number. So lots of variation here, right? But vast majority of parents need some nighttime milk removal, right? In order to maintain supply. Nursing, pumping, expressing. Somehow we got to have milk removal. Baby side of things, right? So the majority of babies need to feed overnight in the first year, right? Now, I think it's important to remember that the age of the baby is going to shape that, right? How often they need to feed, right? A newborn needs to feed every few hours overnight. That's really important. And it's really important in building a supply, right? Building a supply is different than maintaining a supply. A newborn baby really needs to eat for themselves because their tummy is tiny and they're growing really rapidly and we're bringing in that supply. Out of the newborn phase, most babies are still going to eat a couple times overnight, And even older babies, they're going to eat 1, 2, 3 times overnight. This is normal. This is expected. And, this is probably, this is true for bottle-fed babies too. There is some research showing that, bottle-fed babies would still happily eat overnight. They still need those feeds too. We're just more likely to take a bit more structured view of bottle feeding. Not everyone, but societally, the narration is more structured around bottle feeds. And so I do see more folks not necessarily feeding overnight with bottle-fed babies. But I also see lots of clients who do still bottle feed overnight throughout the first year in the same way that we would expect from nursing. So the thing with babies is that age is going to be a big piece of it, right? And how much they tend to take in a feed, right? What's comfortable for them when their body says they're full. But the other thing is that nursing isn't just about food and calories in, right? It is regulation. It is comfort. It is connection. And it's also thirst, right? How many adults go 10, 11 hours overnight without drinking anything, any liquids? A lot of people don't do that. I mean, maybe some do, right? But a lot of people do not go 10 to 12 hours without drinking water. So it's always wild to me when people say, oh, baby at X age doesn't need night feeds anymore. And it's like, okay, maybe no, they're not going to fall off their growth curve or like starve. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't benefit from the calories. And it doesn't mean they're not thirsty. And it doesn't mean they don't need the connection. So from baby side, right, it's normal and most babies need to feed overnight. And toddlers still do often feed overnight. That's just a bit of a different conversation, right, as far as toddlers and when do they need to feed? When is it a want? When is it appropriate to night wean? That's kind of a bigger conversation than we have for this week. Now, I think it's also interesting to think about the role of hormones in lactation and sleep, right? Because lactation hormones actually help you fall asleep faster. And so they can help nursing parents, especially with baby really close by, get a bit more sleep, right? There's some research showing that exclusively nursing bed sharing parents get the most sleep overall. And that those nursing hormones really help parents stay in a more relaxed, drowsy state and get back to sleep more quickly. And that can make a big difference. If you're waking up a couple times a night, how fast you get back to sleep really has a big impact on how much sleep you're getting overall. Now, another thing about lactation hormones that's pretty cool is that prolactin, which is a big milk-making hormone, actually has a circadian rhythm, right? And it peaks in those early morning hours. Think like, 2, 3, 4 a.m. And so feeds during this time have a really positive impact on supply because lactation is already high. Then nursing or expressing kind of drives drives prolactin up even more. And so these early morning feeds are really powerful when it comes to maintaining supply, which is just really cool. So lots of things to consider here, right? When you're thinking about your feeding goals and your sleep goals. Most parents at most ages can go 4 or 5 hours for a longest sleep stretch, right? And that's a really lactation supportive and parental mental health supportive and sleep supportive kind of magic number is that 4 to 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And so when a family's really, really, really struggling, that's where I start as far as like, can we protect this sleep? Can co-parent, partner, baby's other parent or other support system step in and can we get you that sleep without sacrificing your supply? Now, of course, I think it's been obvious. I've said there's a lot of variation here, right? Some parents can go longer than that between night feeds. Some parents can easily have one night feed and maintain supply. And that might be more like, 6+ hours. And that's just going to depend on the baby's age and your body, right? The other big thing about sleep and feeding that we need to think about is what's happening during the day. Because if you have a baby who isn't feeding well during the day, for whatever reason, it could be development, they're distracted, they're always on the move. It could be that they don't eat as well at daycare. It could be that they're reverse cycling, which is when they eat less away from their parent and nurse more when they're with their parent, right? Any number of reasons. And so when those things are happening, then those night feeds become even more significant, right? Because they are actually pretty important in the overall intake. And so if you have a little that isn't taking in a lot during the day, they're going to make up for it at night. And that's just a fact. So it doesn't mean you can't intervene, right? But the baby has to get enough liquid and the baby has to get enough calories. And so sometimes supporting more appropriate intake during the day can help shift intake at night, or it can at least help you feel like, okay, I know they're getting good amount and good feeds during the day. So if we start to work on reducing feeding at night a little bit, we're not worrying about them not getting enough. So I hope this gave you some food for thought, right? These are two really big topics for parents, and they are big, they carry a lot of emotions and a lot of weight, and there's so much information out there and so much incorrect information that I want you to be able to think through them with just the right information, and seeing that there are a lot of factors that might shape your individual experience of, how much does your baby need to be eating at night? How much does your body need, milk removals at night? How long can you go for that longest sleep stretch? And know that you can keep an eye on things, right? Maybe your baby is sleeping longer and you start to notice your supply dip. Okay, that tells you something, right? Maybe your baby's sleeping longer and your supply is awesome. Okay, right? That tells you something. We just need to learn to check in with our bodies, and not expect them all to behave the same way, just like we shouldn't expect all our babies to behave the same way. So I hope that gives you some food for thought. Oh, well, I didn't mean to actually make a pun there, but whatever, about sleep and lactation. And I would love to hear what else is on your mind about sleep and lactation. If you want to head over to my Instagram, send me a DM, head to my website, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.